I planned on doing a stream today, but I got caught up with some stuff that just kind of made it a little bit difficult and sort of impossible in certain ways. I'm not going to say it's entirely impossible. I have other things planned that will come up later on. So we're a couple of months into the, I guess, serious aspect of the 2020 presidential campaign. A majority of the candidates have announced, and we have about over a year for the primaries to actually begin. But you're going to hear dialogue between now and then anyway that's going to suffice and prove to be of consequence and significance. So one of the attacks that I've seen Trump use against a lot of the Democrats, just like as an overall thing, right, is he'll talk about the economy and jobs and whatnot. And one time I did a video where I was talking about him pulling out of Syria, right? And you would think that if one of his defenders was going to respond to that video in which I was critical of his decision to first announce he was going to withdraw and then stay in, that they would defend his decision, right? And be on topic. Nope. They talk about the video's title and they start rattling off all this other stuff that's completely unrelated to the topic at hand. And one of the issues was the economy. Now, I bite back and I go, okay, here's some statistics about why this, because I keep having to say this over and over again. The economy is not an indicator of wealth. When you have 76% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, and then you have one person who can afford to buy something for $1 million, it's going to have the same effect on the economy as if 99 people or 900 people bought enough stuff to equal $1 million. Basically, if one person has a whole bunch of money and they're buying things, it's the same as a bunch of people who have a decent amount or, a living wage being able to buy something in the same number. I feel like that's not such a difficult concept for people to get when they stop licking Trump's nutsack. But anyways, and the person's response to me, they said, "Oh, what are you saying, that jobs are important? You want welfare?" And so I thought to myself, as I was, reading this crybaby response, right? Because they're you can tell they're pooping on themselves that I won't, love their orange emperor. But I was thinking about the what they were stating, and just kind of, I realized, wait a second, they're putting words in my mouth because they have built it in their heads that if you protest to the quote unquote economic policy of the person that's currently occupying the White House, somehow you're not in favor of people having jobs. It's crazy, I know, but I realized as I was sitting here and thinking about a lot of his campaign rhetoric so far in some of the rallies I've watched, where he'll talk about, we've done this, these jobs will come back. Blah, blah, blah. Speaking in general terms, like, we'll get jobs, we'll make jobs, is an easy way to appeal to people that are unemployed without stating the specifics. See, one of the things I like about Sanders is that in the instances where he goes on somewhere like Fox or CNN or any of these other networks, if they ask him those gotcha questions where it's like, oh, we have this $1 trillion deficit, how are you going to and he answers back, he gives a detailed response outlining what the problem is, how he's going to address it, whatnot. In the instance of Trump appealing to these people with saying jobs, I had an epiphany where I realized those kind of like empty statements about what you'll do and these promises that don't go into the specifics, they're entirely designed around taking people who don't pay attention to this stuff beyond the presidential elections and going on Twitter and whatnot and gassing them up to make them seem like they're impressed or excited, just for them to go and, completely be swindled when they actually get the job that they supposedly wanted that, was not elaborated to them. So what I mean by that is, if someone said, hey, I want you to, here's some jobs, let me tell you about them, I'd ask, wait a second, how much does a job pay? Is it manual labor? Am I going to have to break my back to get $2 extra over, whatever the minimum wage is national? I think it was $7, a little bit over $7. So when you start going to the specifics of what kind of positions are these low paying and whatnot, that's when the illusion starts to swindle away. Because see, to Trump's credit, he never talked about, you know, favoring a minimum wage increase or raising the stagnant wages of the last 40 years. And what I find very hilarious is that a lot of people who talk about being opposed to raising the minimum wage like to, you know, make this claim that supposedly it's going to cause. There's the two arguments I always see are it'll cause people to lose their positions because these jobs will fire them to, you know, whatever, and also that it's going to somehow destroy the economy. And I said to myself, what person has again licked Trump's nutsack enough to believe that if you give people $8 instead of 7, everything explodes? And I find it like people don't get how partisan they are for no reason. Like I remember when they were talking about the Green New Deal. Oh my God, it's going to $1 trillion deficit. No, this bankrupt the country. But here's something where it's literally nowhere near as ambitious as that, and they still tell you you can't do it. And what I realize it's their way of being complacent with a system that they've voted for without knowing the full details of, oh, it'll work out because, you know, if you just work enough years with your $7 wage, you'll be able to buy everything. You know, they'll tell themselves all this stuff about, you know, the person is the problem. The people are the reason that stuff is as screwed up as it is. And the people do vote for these terrible individuals. So there is some validity to that. But if an individual, and we've been over the fact that we have the this high productivity, right? People are, that's what, you know, low unemployment means that if you have a system where all these people are working and then 76% of them live paycheck to paycheck, and are on the brink of, you know, being impoverished in spite of the fact that they are readily employed, that's a failure. But they don't want to talk about those things because it's not within their bubble. See, a lot of these Trump supporters have, you know, they have this thing where they like to believe that if you don't go along with what he says, you have Trump derangement syndrome. You have some kind of issue where you're a Hillary supporter. All this stuff that, you know, just complete generalizations, right? But they have to tell themselves that any kind of perceived handout, whether it's free school or you know, Medicare for all, an extra dollar in your paycheck, just anything like that, is supposedly taking away from the American dream of, you know, living like you're impoverished and then finally crawling your way out of it. But I think most people would agree that if they change the minimum wage to $1 and, you know, you're working 8 hours for $8, people would say that's ridiculous. Nobody can afford to. Nobody can live that way. So then, why is you know, why is there such a disconnect around saying let's make this 15, let's make this 16, 17, 18, 14, 13? You know, why is that such a problem? And I realized again, it's because these people have it built in their head to not think about the finer details of things, to assume everyone that has a certain type of problem is the exact same way. And anytime somebody, you know, questions this system, they just don't like Trump because they wanted Hillary to win. And yes, it's a short-sighted response. It's a way of looking at things that's very, you know, not taking different factors into account. But it's not supposed to. It's an attempt to obfuscate from the real people in power that choose for things to be this way. You're not going to tell me someone that lives in, you know, that has billions of dollars can't afford to pay their workers the minimum wage, or dare I say, $1 more. And, you know, all this stuff about these businesses cracking down and throwing people, like, dude, why? You're telling me that between the president, Congress, and just any other, the governors, we can go down the different branches of government, between all these different various agencies and people in positions of power, they can't piece together a single law that would prevent an employer from firing workers after a wage increase. There's nothing they can do to stop that. But this is what I'm talking about. These people don't want to accept things about how the system is designed to where the people at the top are able to live like kings and be defended by all these commoners on the internet, and then the people at the bottom end up getting the blame and the suffering to go along with the rules that were instated by people who were in positions of power. So I hope I've explained it. Jobs are something that people most likely would say, I'm glad they're coming and whatnot, but the finer details of how much you're getting paid, um, you have to move somewhere to do this. Those are the things you have to ask yourself. And suddenly that little buzzword that Republicans like to throw around doesn't sound too appealing. So thank you for watching and have a good day.